Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is a pre-recorded live stream, so it's just like a normal live stream except we're not here live. Basically what that means is if you are watching this as you would at the same time as you would a normal live stream, then I'm releasing it as a premiere. The chat is still there, the moderators are still there, the people are still there. Say hi to people. I may even pop in for a few minutes. I'm hoping to be able to as well, but obviously not being live, I won't be able to answer your questions live. That being said, what I am doing this time is I'm answering questions from my patrons. I set up last time, I kind of teased we would do a few tinfoil theories. So that's what we're doing today. We're just working our way through some tinfoil theories in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I'll be honest, I got quite a lot, and quite a lot of them were quite detailed. So, patrons, if I do not cover your tinfoil theory in this video, do not fear. It's only because I've had to arbitrarily draw a line somewhere, and I'm going to do the other ones that you sent me in another one of these pre-recorded live streams. So they will all get covered. Also, I've had to trim a few of them down just a touch. So apologies also if you feel I've kind of missed a few of your points. But there we have it. We will be dotting around looking at these different tinfoil theories. And I'll say right now, if you like this and you want me to do a few more tinfoil theory videos, then just put your own tinfoil theory down in the comments below, and I will try and pick up on it for a future one. But let's dive straight in with a question or a theory from Mr. Worldwide saying, "Hello, my good sir Robert. I haven't worked this one out much, so humour me. Cersei or Jamie and Jamie are Aerys's bastards, not Tyrion. Cersei shares a few key personality traits with the Mad King, particularly extreme paranoia and obsession with enemies. Both play for short-term victories, sacrificing long-term gains, unlike Tywin. Even Jamie sees some of the Mad King in her. Their incestuous relationship is also very Targaryen-y. Perhaps Jamie represents what Aerys would have looked like had this is Aerys the Mad King, obviously, had his Targaryen coin landed on the other side. And finally, to top it all off, the irony of Tyrion being Tywin's only trueborn child would be fantastic." Well, I have to say, I did actually do a theory video on this. I don't know when this was, a while ago. If you go back, it was focused mostly on Cersei for reasons which will become apparent as we go along. So if you want a fuller answer on this, then do please go and check out that video. I have to admit, a few years ago when I first heard about this as a theory, I didn't really buy into it. But the more I kind of reread the story, the more I analyze Cersei's chapters, the more you can see the parallels with the Mad King. Now, the background to all this, if you're not 100% sure about all of this, was that we know that Aerys the Mad King, he kind of had a thing about Tywin's wife, Joanna. And being king, he took quite a few liberties. It's never very clear exactly how far he went with those liberties, but clearly Tywin was not happy, but also he didn't have the power to stop it. Joanna, for what it's worth, also seemed to have been pretty unhappy about that whole situation. Now, the timing here actually works better. If there was a bastard child born from that, the timing does actually work better for Cersei and Jamie than it does for Tyrion, it has to be said. But you do then get this immediate issue about, well, they're twins. Are they both the Mad Kings or not? There is some, I'm sure someone in the chat much cleverer than me will know the exact phrase. There is a technical term for twins, which maybe they have two different fathers. It can theoretically, and I think actually in real life, occasionally has happened where there are two different fathers of twins. So maybe George R. R. Martin's gone down that way. We don't know. But the evidence for this, as much as anything else, is really coming through the character of Cersei. Now, when we get to her chapters in A Feast for Crows, we actually open, the very first thing we get from her perspective is her having a dream of her sat on the Iron Throne, and then her having dreams about having another city moving. She doesn't like King's Landing, it's very smelly. Moving, having a palace on the other side of the river. That is exactly the same kind of vision, we're told, that the Mad King had. So George R. R. Martin is deliberately setting this thought up in our minds that maybe there's some kind of link there. Certainly he's setting up the idea that she wants to be king, that she thinks she ought to be king. We get the messages, though, hammered home again and again and again. There is one chapter where the echoes of her and Robert Baratheon are very strong, but a lot of the rest of the time we get these echoes of her with Aerys. So, for example, it becomes very clear that she always, yes, in love with Jamie, etc., but she really, really found Rhaegar attractive. And she thought that she was destined to marry him. She thought she was going to. She had been promised to marry him, but that didn't happen. But she still thought about him all this time later. And obviously, Targaryen siblings, that kind of works. Then you get her when she is Queen Regent and she's picking her small council. Some of the names start just ringing a few bells. We get a Merryweather, for example. We had a Merryweather in last time in the Mad King's small council. We have a Rosby. We have a Valorian. He's not actually got the name Valorian or any Waters, but he's a Valyrian bastard. And we also, obviously, we've still got Pycelle in there. So she's sort of recreating the Mad King's small council, and the way that it operates also seems to be very much along those lines. It's full of yes men. They may well have their own ideas and their own sort of ambitions, but none of them are really what you could call hugely competent. Maybe in their own ways, some people like Lorraine Waters or Pycelle have their own competencies, but coming to the small council, they don't get the opportunity to use them. So that's another echo that we've got going on there. And then you mentioned this in your sort of comment as well. Jamie sees bits of the Mad King in her. I'll read out what we get when Jamie thinks back to the moment when she burns down the Tower of the Hand. She burns down the Tower of the Hand with wildfire, with the pyromancers, and again, if you remember, they last were in power, like they were last powerful when the Mad King was in power, and then suddenly with Cersei, they come back standing there, right, powerful next to the throne, and she orders the Tower of the Hand burnt with wildfire. And this is what Jamie remembers. Even in the baleful glow, Cersei had been beautiful to look upon. She'd stood with one hand on her breast, her lips parted, her green eyes shining. She is crying, Jamie had realized, but whether it was from grief or ecstasy he could not have said. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Aerys Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. So we're being given this idea very, very clearly of her echoing the Mad King in many ways. She is also echoing other monarchs. We've got Robert Baratheon. I suspect we're going to see an echo of Rhaenyra as well when we move into the next book, The Winds of Winter. And this idea that we had Aerys, who was he wanted to basically blow up the city with wildfire. Might we expect that, therefore, from Cersei? Because this is where this is leading. Regardless of whether, and I suspect we will never fully 100% find out, this has the feel of the kind of thing that George R. R. Martin will allow us to draw our own conclusions. He, at the very least, is drawing the lines between these two characters and saying this character echoes that character. Does that mean that necessarily she's his daughter? No, it does not mean that, but she could be. And if we do end up with something a bit like they had on the show when she blew up the Great Sept with wildfire, then I think we would see that as a kind of a small echo of what the Mad King was wanting to do at the very end of his reign. And also, I mean, we kind of just focus in on that and sort of say often quite blithely, that Fagon's going to come in and she's going to have to flee the city. She's got the pyromancers there with wildfire. Might she decide she wants to blow up the city on the way out? That would be, it's a very Cersei kind of thing to do. I'm not going to leave that asset to somebody else. If I'm having to leave, nobody else is going to be able to claim it. You could imagine her thinking that. That would fully echo the Mad King. So, as a theory, I'm growing to like it more all the time. Is Tyrion a Targaryen one? I've often said is the theory that I kind of vacillate on the most, for reasons that I won't go into here. But is Cersei a Targaryen? The more times I reread her chapters, the more often I go, it's not impossible. In fact, it's beyond, for me, it's now beyond tinfoil. It's something you can justify. It may not be right, but you can definitely justify it. Okay, so that's the first one. The second, from 444, saying Euron isn't the Saruman of Westeros, he is only a decoy. The true Saruman of Westeros is the Weirwood network. After defeating the others, Bloodraven will use Bran to dominate the whole of Westeros, with last resistance points in the areas where Weirwoods cannot grow. Rickon will die in an attempt to defend the people of the north of the Riverlands from Bloodraven and Bran. The last survivors from these areas will escape to set up a new kingdom in the disputed lands where there are no weirwood trees. Okay, so first of all, we should probably explain what this idea of Saruman of Westeros is. It's something I come back to as a kind of a thematic idea that George R. R. Martin, when he was asked, this was a few years ago now, he was asked about the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire. And he came out with that word that we always use, bittersweet. He says it's going to be bittersweet. Then he gives a couple of examples about what bittersweet means, both from The Lord of the Rings. He is a massive Tolkien fan. So he comes out with these, the first idea is Frodo, and the way that Frodo, he does his duty. Without him, without his sacrifice, then the world would not be saved. The world, Middle-earth, was saved, however, not for him, because all of the pain, all of the suffering that he felt, that was still with him. And so he did not save it for himself. And that is bittersweet, George R. R. Martin said. The second way he said is like the Scouring of the Shire. The Scouring of the Shire, the penultimate chapter in The Lord of the Rings, it wasn't shown in the films, so a lot of people aren't as aware of it. But basically, the hobbits head back to the Shire. It's just them. Everyone else has sort of gone off and is doing their thing. The hobbits come back and, well, it's been taken over by some ruffians. And lo and behold, Saruman's behind all of this. And all of the things that Tolkien hates have happened. Trees have been chopped down, scorched earth, subjugation of the hobbits. This is, industrialization, the kinds of things that Tolkien really did not like. But anyway, the hobbits, they use their resourcefulness, they use the confidence, they use everything that they've gained from their experiences, and they lead the Hobbit revolt, and Saruman gets defeated. And George R. R. Martin talks in glowing terms about this chapter. He said, the first time he read it, he wasn't quite sure what it was there for, but each time he suddenly realizes, and I can't remember the exact words, but it's hyperbolic praise. I mean, it's marvelous, it's wonderful, it's amazing. He really likes that. and so we're left with, so what is it about this kind of feel do we have that he's wanting to translate into the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire? And the idea has to be, I think, something along the lines of our heroes having accomplished the main quest and ending in order to, they can't just go back home and everything's okay. There's the secondary baddie, Saruman in this instance, the kind of secondary baddie is still there and has to be defeated, and they do that without all of the kind of the superpower weapons and things. So the hobbits did it without Gandalf, without Aragorn, without armies going on, without magic swords. They just did it by themselves. And so this is the idea: is that after all of the high fantasy stuff has happened, you still have to get rid of the secondary bad guy. And I had speculated that if that is the case, then the most likely secondary bad guy is Euron, because we're all going to be fixated on the others, and we're going to be fixated on the dragons. But Euron is going to be doing crazy stuff down in the sort of southwest of Westeros, maybe even further afield. And so he probably is the person who has to be defeated. So that's what this question is saying. But is positing that actually it's not Euron. The sort of the bad, once the others have been defeated, we suddenly realise that it's the Weirwood network who have to also be defeated, and they do this by and you say dominating the whole of Westeros. I think we can just sort of imagine if you get skin changers and wogs, it could be carnage, particularly with the Westeros that has already been pretty devastated by war. So, do we think this is possible? Well, one thing I would definitely say is the Weirwood network is not good per se. George R. R. Martin doesn't like operating in here's the good side, here's the bad side. They are multi-layered. They are looking after their own interests as well as, they're not just magnanimously here training up humans to save humans. They're also caring about themselves. And we do have to remember that the Weirwood network and the Children of the Forest, they were the first people on Westeros. So as far as they're concerned, humans were the invaders. And if they can get rid of them, then they can have their continent back. So you can kind of see the logic behind this. I wouldn't discount the idea that the Weirwood network will take a darker turn once, assuming the others are defeated. But the way that George R. R. Martin has structured this right from the very beginning, and although yes, lots has changed in the story as he's been writing it, he has always been quite clear that he has the ending in mind. He knows where he's heading with all of this. It's not completely gardening style. He likes to give that impression, but he does know where he's going with this story. He knows the overall big I'm going to say the big arc, the idea about where he's going to go to, and that has always been based on this ice and fire. Two threats, and then there's fire and ice. The famous Robert Frost poem, which I don't have here. I've quoted it many times, but basically it says that fire and ice can both destroy the world, and so you've got to watch out for both of them. And this is the idea: is that in his original conception, you have the Civil War going on, and then once the Civil War's kind of finished, you get the invasion from Dany and the dragons, and that's got to be dealt with in some way. And then you get the others, the ice, and that has to be dealt with in some way. So how we reach an ending with that is that all three of those things have to be dealt with. We have to deal with the Civil War, we have to deal with the others, and we have to deal with the dragons, who are big, scary monsters who kill lots of things. So I think he would have had to make a huge change to where he was heading with this in order to get to the point where actually the story is not about those other things, not about those main things. Could they be the Saruman, the secondary baddie? Possibly, but I think it's much more likely from my perspective, that what will happen is that we'll end up with a situation where the others have been dealt with, the dragons have been dealt with, however this happens, and Euron has been dealt with, and the Weirwood network has survived. But we now understand quite how big and powerful the Weirwood network is, and we're supposed to feel, whereas everyone's just relieved, this is all over, we're supposed to feel a little bit wary of it. I think that's probably where he would like to leave it, not with, and now they're in command and humanity loses. I think it's where we've won, but is the victory, is it a Pyrrhic victory? Is there a darker side to all of this? Okay, so let's go to a question from Lady Vaughan-Strauss, saying, to me, it seems clear that the House of Black and White, this is the base of the Faceless Men, is based upon the High Priestess tarot card. There's a ton of correlating symbolism. The priestess is flanked by black and white pillars and known as the First Temple. The House of Black and White is known as the First Temple of Braavos. It's of a similar windowless architectural style, has weirwood and ebony doors instead of pillars. She sits on the throne at the threshold of esoteric knowledge in front of the pillars, where she guards higher mysteries from those who are not ready or unable to receive it, though will reveal it to those she deems worthy, which is Jaqen's function for Arya. One passes through the pillars only with permission, help, and guidance. The moon at her feet symbolizes the moon's power to stir the unconsciousness. And there is a moon on the Weirwood door. And behind her is the veil that shields the greatest hidden truths from life. And that's the beyond the veil being a term for the afterlife. Is this based on the tarot card for the High Priestess? You also sort of attached to this, the second part to this, you suggested the Tower tarot card. Symbolically, that tower gets overfilled with unaddressed problems, repressed responsibilities, general badness, until the pressure builds to an untenable point and it bursts, exploding into flames with fire and lightning raining down upon it. Old Valyria was a city of towers which, for various mysterious reasons, exploded into flames with fire, lightning raining down upon it. Old Valyria is the tower card. Okay, so I should probably start by saying I'm not a tarot expert by any stretch of the imagination, so I may misread or misunderstand some of the symbolism that's going on there. My understanding is that the images on tarot cards can change between different decks. The meanings can also subtly shift and change and alter with that as well. So I would suggest not, if there is a link here, then it's not in the details so much as the themes which might be there. Now, of those two, yeah, I think so. The High Priestess, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of what you say. The House of Black and White is a temple, and the kindly man is a priest, a high priest, really, of that temple. They do have this knowledge that they only reveal to a certain number of people, and they are very much connected with death and knowledge that comes from beyond the veil, as it were. So I absolutely get all of that does kind of stack up. As for the tower, yeah, I could also certainly see that one. I do wonder, the big tower in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is in Old Town, of course, the High Tower. We don't know what's going to happen to that, but it does have a fire on the top of it, and it is going to very probably get attacked at some point. So, might that come tumbling down? Who knows, but it's entirely possible. It's the kind of thing that you could imagine George R. R. Martin kind of like smiling at the idea of having established this massively tall tower. Of course, I'm going to bring it falling down. So, do we think that George R. R. Martin might have based this on tarot cards? I mean, I can't rule it out. I personally have never seen anything from him saying that he did gain inspiration. There's lots of inspirations that he does name check, historical inspirations, inspirations from other authors. I've personally never seen him talking about inspirations from tarot. However, there is a link, which you may or may not know about George R. R. Martin, which is Charis, his wife. Now, if you sort of dive deep into his Not a Blog, you'll see many years ago he did like a little, I think it was a happy birthday thing to her, and sort of lots of pictures from the past about where I met her, and this is her at this age, and things like that. And the one of the first photos, in fact, I think the first photo he says from when he first met her, which was 1975 at a Worldcon. Worldcons mean a lot to him for a variety of reasons. He met her first at a Worldcon, and there's a picture that he had up there of her, and he says, I met her with Joe Haldeman, who's a fantastic, I think sadly he's passed away now, but a fantastic science fiction writer, and she was doing a tarot reading for him. So she clearly is into tarot. Now, that means that George R. R. Martin must be at least aware and must have a certain degree of knowledge. So if I had to say I love the theorizing, I don't see any direct evidence that this is there, but as a sort of a subconscious influence, then I certainly couldn't rule it out. Sort of connected with this, with the Faceless Men, at least, Angela Reed. The Night King was a green seer. This is the theory. The Night King was a green seer, and Arya had to become no one so that he couldn't prophesy an actual person to go after to try and change the future. It's not really tinfoil. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, so this is a show theory as opposed to a book theory, partly because in the books, Arya has not become no one, and yet who knows where that's going. Also, the Night King does not exist in the books yet. George R. R. Martin has drawn a very clear distinction between the Night King in the book, in the show, and the Night's King, which is his mythical, legendary character that he has in the book, who is only mentioned, to be honest, 2 or 3 times really, but exists much more brightly in our imaginations. And I think that's partly because of the way that George R. R. Martin writes it. It appears important. So this is a show theory that the Night King is he's a green seer. Let's take that bit first, because I think there's a book link in here as well. Now, the way the show did this was they said the others, the White Walkers, they were created by the Children of the Forest. You remember there was that scene where you get Bran went back and saw this through his visions, and they were trying to protect themselves at the time from the invasions of humanity, and they made this super warrior. They, in front of a weirwood tree, pushed dragonglass into his heart, did some magic mumbo jumbo, whatever, and then the Night King appears. So, and then from that point on, he can create more White Walkers, and also he can raise whites. And the theory within the show, or the way that the show presented it, is that the reason why the others, the White Walkers, are as they are is because they are set up as a super soldier against humanity. They are stronger than humans. They are impervious to normal human weapons. And the big thing that humans have as their advantage against the children of the others is that humans reproduce so quickly. There's just lots of them. And what the others, the White Walkers, can do is raise dead humans and add them to their side. So when they go into battle, actually the numbers of the humans starts to turn against them, thus making them the perfect warriors to go up against humanity. And just to give the kind of like in case things go a little bit wrong, the Children of the Forest put in this kind of like backdoor thing, is that their weakness is against dragon glass, which is what the Children of the Forest used. So that's the theory. And the kind of working theory based off of that was that this person that they turned into the Night King was, in order to make this happen, was basically a greenseer, so had the greenseer abilities. When they got turned into one of the White Walkers, those got kind of twisted, perverted, turned around, put into the upside down, whichever way you want to think of it, which meant that the Night King could connect with Bran through his kind of weirwood visions, through his magic, because he's doing the same kind of magic. And in the same way that greenseers can skin change into live animals and humans, as we've seen with Bran into Hodor, so the Night King, others can do that to dead humans and dead animals, ice spiders, for example. So that's a theory. And I kind of like, they didn't really hugely go into it, but I kind of like that. We often go into great pains, or we often go to great pains to try and distance what's going to happen in the books from what happened on the TV show, and for understandable reasons. But some things you go, okay, that sort of works-ish. It won't be exactly like that, I'm sure, but in the books, we haven't got enough information yet. We don't know exactly who the others are, where they're coming from, what they want. Presumably, we'll get a whole lot more information than we did on the show. But this idea that perhaps this started out with, this was a human, they are clearly humanoid, this is a human which has been turned into another thing, an other, and that human had greenseer abilities, and so has got a kind of an upside down version of greenseer abilities. That all kind of, that sort of works for me. If you don't do that, then you have to say either they've just always been there, or they were brought in somehow by the Children of the Forest, or they stumbled their way in, or something along those lines. But I think the most logical, I'm going off on quite a tangent, so apologies, just on the first line of your theory. But we're looking all the way through this for what was this massive bit of magic that set the seasons off balance, because that is the starting point for all of this. And for me, that speaks of not just the others have always been there and they just turned up and then they went away and they're going to turn up again, but they were created or summoned or something like that by the Children of the Forest, and that is the massive bit of magic. So the theory is the Night King was a greenseer, and Arya had to become no one so that the Night King couldn't target them and try to change the future. So this is the idea being that if we've seen with Bran can go into the Weirwood network and sort of move around time, and time can be a little bit flexible for him. Could the Night King perhaps have been able to see into the future and work out, oh, this is the person who's going to kill me, and so go in and try and stop them? But he couldn't, because Arya became no one. Now, I think in the books, and that may well be the case on the show, they left it quite vague what being no one meant. In the books, I think it's quite clear that Arya will, although she may say that she's no one, she's certainly giving no impression of ever actually leaving behind her Stark heritage. For one thing, she's still got a needle hidden away. For another thing, every night almost she's getting dreams of Nymeria. She's still got her kill list absolutely uppermost in her mind. In that pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, we're already somewhere into the Winds of Winter with this. She's there. Oh, that's someone on my kill list, and going off and try to kill them. She is not becoming no one in the books. She is staying a Stark. Because, and again, this is a huge tangent based on the second sentence of your theory, but because she goes there because she thinks she's got nothing. Now, if she thinks she's got nothing because she thinks that all of her siblings are dead, except Arya, who's married into the except Arya, except Sansa, who's married into the Lannisters. She thinks Winterfell has been burned to the ground. She thinks there's nothing for her. Even the person that she sort of took on as this kind of weird mentor figure, the Hound, he's gone. She can't get access to the rest of her relatives. Riverrun's fallen. She can't go and see her aunt Lysa. She won't be let in. So she's got nothing. She might as well go there. But the moment she gets information that actually her siblings are alive, Winterfell is being retaken, whatever it is, that's when she'll go, oh, I do have a home. So I think in the books that will definitely not happen. In terms of whether in the show, her becoming no one means that she can't be sort of seen in the future. I mean, I think linguistically that works. I don't know whether they explained enough to make that work on the show. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things where they simply did not explain enough on the show for us to sort of come out with good working theories on a lot of the things to do with the White Walkers. So if that works for you, as you say, you think it's not tinfoil, it makes perfect sense. If that makes sense for you, then I think you run with it. If I were you. Let's go to a question from Stephen. Do you think there is any credence to the theory that Roose Bolton is immortal? I've heard suggestions that he is a faceless man or some kind of vampire, but I have a simpler explanation. What if the Boltons are skin changers, like some of the other First Men families? From what we know of warging, a particularly unscrupulous skin changer could cheat death by warging into another human. And if that new host was someone who was also a skin changer, could they then retain the ability in their new body? Perhaps Roose was an ancient Bolton lord who realized that he could achieve a kind of immortality by walking into his own son before dying, and then his grandson, and so on, once every generation, from father to son. This might explain Roose's favour of Ramsay. His pale grey Bolton eyes are the sign that he has inherited the skin-changing trait and is a suitable host. Okay, so for those who've missed it, this theorizing that Roose Bolton, there's more to him than it would appear, has been going around for quite a few years now. Now, why? Because he comes across as very cold, very calculating. His grey eyes and the way they're described does seem kind of weird and ethereal. Added to which, he seems quite relaxed about the fact he's going to die. And he seems quite relaxed about the fact that Ramsay is going to be killing all of his other children. He's just almost he kind of shrugs about it. So all of that just kind of like comes up with that, well, maybe something's going on there. I would agree that the Boltons are first men family, so perhaps there's a skin changing thing there. The symbolism of the flaying, you could very easily take that as being this is a trying to graphically represent in some way, you're taking on someone else's skin. So yeah, that kind of works. So there is a lot that you could say, yes, it kind of all adds up. But at the same time, with all of these things, you just have to say there's no cut and dried evidence for this. There's never a point at which we get actually a hint that Roose Bolton reveals information about previous centuries that he shouldn't have had, or he cares about things from he has in his possession some kind of heirloom from many generations previous that nobody really understands why he keeps. There's none of that. There's no hints to this from George R. R. Martin. The other thing that I would sort of add into it is that you then have to say, okay, we get if this is Roose, and I'll talk about the practicality in just one moment, but if this is Roose, you have to say that every Bolton Lord was there for him. He looked a bit different, but it was there for him. Is there any evidence that the Bolton Lords have been the same person? Have they acted in the same way? They've kept up a sort of a long-standing dislike of the Starks and a desire to sort of have more power, but there's no hint that anyone sort of says, "Oh, he's just like his father," or actually just like his grandfather as well. There's never a hint of that. In terms of sort of the practicalities, yes. We have seen that it is possible for a skin changer, a powerful skin changer, to go into another human's brain, basically, and take it over. Bran does this. Now, it's not a matter, as far as we can tell, of kicking out Hodor. He sort of seems to, when you think about it, it's really not very good or nice. He's kind of barges his way in there, and at one point he just sort of thinks, oh yeah, so Hodor doesn't even try and resist me anymore. He just like hides in a corner. So Hodor's still there. So what we're expecting, therefore, is that Roose goes in and he doesn't kick out his ancestor, or his ancestors are presumably still there in some way. Or perhaps they fade over time. Who knows? We do get Varamir Sixskins, who we know is a powerful skin changer. He might have been at a physical low ebb, but we know that he was a powerful skin changer. And at the end of his life, this is the prologue chapter to A Dance with Dragons, at the end of his life, he tries to skin change into the body of this woman called Thistle, and she struggles. And she tries to fight him off, and even bites off her own tongue with the struggle. That's how much human, and as far as we can tell, Thistle wasn't anything special magically. She didn't have any particular powers, but she was fought so hard not to get pushed out of herself in any way, and she succeeded. So that's another thing that we don't kind of hear any tell of, is that he in any way kind of has had these sort of Boltons in the past have had these kind of struggles where their tongue had been bitten out or anything like that. So is it possible? Yes, it's possible. This is all of these things with George R. R. Martin. He set up magic systems that you use them and adapt them in a number of different ways. Is it possible that a skin changer becomes so powerful that they could push aside, take over somebody else, and then have another long life after that? All the bits of lore that Varamir himself gets, just things handed down from Hadon, was his master who taught him the stuff. Who knows whether he actually knew the right of it at all? He said so many things were abominations. He said 3 things were abominations, including that, which seems to imply that not many people have tried it or done it. So we don't know. It is possible. Does it look likely? Is there any actual supporting evidence for it? I think not really. And I suspect that it's not the kind of thing that we'd ever really find out. But yeah, it could be. It is classic tinfoil. It could be, but I think the evidence for it is circumstantial. Magma Frost saying, okay, this one originates from the Interesting Nerd Club, who I didn't know at all. I had to look them up for this. They are another YouTube channel who do Song of Ice and Fire videos. I have not watched any of their videos. I therefore cannot personally recommend them. However, I very much like to support smaller channels within my niches. So please do go and check out the Interesting Nerd Club, which is a great name, by the way, for a YouTube channel. The Interesting Nerd Club. Have a watch of their videos, see whether they're any good. Say hi from me in the comments. So Magnum Frost saying, I fully buy into it and I'd love to hear your take. Marwyn the Mage is Maegor Brightflame, the son of Aerion Brightflame, who mysteriously disappears from history as a 1-year-old after being denied the throne. The most important piece of evidence is when he says, ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted, no more than I can. This line doesn't confirm that he's a Targaryen, but it very strongly implies it. We don't know his original hair colour or his eye colour, nor how old he is, but 67 is certainly a plausible age, which is how old Maegor would be. And as far as Targaryen men with unknown fates, who'd be a plausible age for Marwyn, Maegor Brightflame is pretty much the only candidate. And something had to be done with this incredibly politically inconvenient baby, who by all rights should have been king. I think sending him to the Citadel is probably the best option short of killing a baby. Okay, so there's a lot there. Let's start with very briefly who Marwyn the Mage is, if you are unaware. This is a book-only character. Sam comes across him right at the very end of A Feast for Crows, and he is the Archmaester of the Higher Mysteries, of magic, basically, and he's been charting Sam's progress through the Dragonglass Candle, Obsidian Candle, and Sam tells him what's going on, and he says, right, that's it, I need to go and advise Danny. He gets all about and goes, and that's pretty much it. We literally only get a few pages of him, but he has got quite an impact. So that's who he is, and he will therefore, by implication, he will be appearing again in The Winds of Winter. He's going to be one of the many people who are going over to Meereen to find Danny and try to advise her. The Maegor Targaryen, the son of Aerion Targaryen, is a character many people probably don't know huge amounts about. Aerion Targaryen, Aerion Brightflame, was the brother of Aemon, Maester Aemon, and Egg. And he makes an appearance, quite a significant appearance, in The Hedge Knight, first of the Dunk and Egg stories, which, of course, is soon, at the time of recording this, soon to be shown on our screens as A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1. So soon we will see Aerion, and it's fair to say he was, often used as an example of the Targaryens we know about, the coin flippers, whether they're going to be good or insane, and this one was one of the mad ones. And he's certainly in The Hedge Knight. He's not a nice character. He's not a good character. He's pretty horrible, to be honest. His fate is that later on he drinks. We don't know told exactly how much actually, but he drinks wildfire, thinking that it will turn him into a dragon. It doesn't, and he dies. So we get kind of like a reference across to that Maester Aemon when he sort of says, all of my brothers, they dreamed of dragons and they died for it or because of it. Aerion, of course, was his brother, so this kind of adds up. Now, before he died, he had a son, and this son he named Maegor. Now, everybody basically assumes that the reason why he named him Maegor is after Maegor the Cruel, recognised by most people as one of, if not the worst, most horrible, hence the moniker, Targaryen kings that there were. And he named his son this, and then he died. And when his son was 1, there was a succession crisis, and there was a great council to decide who should become king. Out of the other side of that egg emerges as Aegon V. Aegon the Unlikely, he was known, he was the 4th son of a 4th son. He was never thought he was going to inherit. This is why they allowed him to go wandering around the 7 kingdoms with Dunk, because he was actually quite a long way down the line of succession. But all of those people in front of him in the line of succession, pretty much, they all died. And so they had a great council to decide who should be king. Now, we generally remember this, that it ended up with Egg, but before that they offered it to Maester Aemon, and Aemon refused it. He refused the offer to become a king, and he said, okay, I will be a distraction. If I now that I'm here, some people at some point will try and rally around me because I was ahead of you in the line of succession, and they will try and rally around me even if I don't want it. And the only solution to this is I'm going to go and join the Night's Watch. Just go away from here. And fair enough, that's what happened. He got forgotten up in the Night's Watch. So the other bit that we often forget is that there were other candidates. It wasn't just those 2, there were other candidates. And one of the other candidates was this child, this 1-year-old child of Aerion, who was known as Maegor. And he was passed over. He was passed over for 2 reasons, really, one of which was that he was a child. He was 1 year old. And that meant that there would have to be a very long regency. And that didn't feel like something that anybody really wanted. Things hadn't gone that well in the regency of, say, Aegon III after the Dance of the Dragons. There were rebellions, coup attempts, and not long after that, all the dragons died. It didn't really inspire confidence in a regency. So a lot of people didn't want it for that reason, but also because he was the son of Aerion and he'd been named Maegor. People were just a bit concerned. They didn't know what this person was going to be like, but if he took after his father, that wasn't who they wanted as king. So he got passed over. After which he disappears from the history books. We don't know what happens with him. So, what do we make of this? Might he have reappeared much later as Marwyn the Mage? Well, the first thing to say is that this isn't a mystery that he disappeared from the history books. The way that we say it makes it sound like, oh, and then disappeared from the history books. Who knows what happened? Lots of Targaryens just weren't mentioned again. This is just all we have here is the World of Ice and Fire history of the Targaryens. which is extremely limited. So until George R. R. Martin writes Fire and Blood Part 2, Blood and Fire, we will not know the fates of a lot of those Targaryens. So that's point one. It's not a mystery what happened to him. He could have just died as a child. Because point number two, at this point in time, this is when there was that high concentration of Targaryens just dying of random things. During the 25, 30 years, I think it was 27 years of Bloodraven as Hand of the King, Targaryens died at a rate of about one a year. For a relatively small family, when you add in the Blackfires, who are basically an extension of that same family, different surname, but they're still Targaryens, so they were dying at the rate of about one a year. And some of them were dying from entirely random and curious things, like Baelor Breakspear dying well, spoilers, dying in the Hedge Knight, and one Targaryen choking on a lamprey pie. This is all of these, and then swallowing the Aryans, swallowing the wildfire. These are not just. There were some people who died from winter fever and things like that, but these are not just normal deaths. These are not people living a long life and then dying in their bed. That didn't happen. This is very suspicious. I'll come back to do a whole load of Bloodraven videos at some point, do not worry, but this is incredibly suspicious how all of these died. So your first question, or your first kind of point about would you really kill a child? This is that part of history where Targaryens did die in mysterious circumstances. So my best guess is that is what happened to him. But then you say, okay, what if it didn't? Might this be Marwyn the Mage? Well, to sort of tackle the point about maybe you send him to the Citadel, that way he's not a threat. We've seen that Maester Aemon very clearly thought that he would still be a threat if he were in. Him being the other candidate who potentially could have been king, he thought him being a maester was still presenting a threat to the Iron Throne. So the person who was in charge of deciding whether he got sent down there would have been Egg, who'd just been told a Targaryen who'd been passed over for the Iron Throne, who trains up to be a maester, is still a threat to you. People will still try and rally around them. And, I'm your brother and really good friend to you. He's not. I don't think that logic works personally. I don't think the logic that he would have been sent to the Citadel really quite tallies. I think, and this isn't intended, by the way, as a sort of a takedown. I really enjoyed working my way through this and just trying to say, do I agree with that or not? The line about ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why he could not be trusted. No more than I can. Personally, I think an interpretation that says that Marwyn is saying he's a Targaryen, I think places, for me, too much weight on that one interpretation of that last sentence of no more than I can be trusted. He doesn't. I can't be trusted because I'm a Targaryen. The logic of the first bit of that section is that Targaryens can't be trusted, therefore they are not raised to Archmaester. However, we know that Marwyn was raised to Archmaester, so the logic kind of defeats itself, if that makes sense. So I don't think using that logic does imply that he's a Targaryen. And then I think the final thing I would say is, and I should have copied it here beforehand. In terms of Marwyn the Mage, actually, let's just very quickly see whether I can do some live quickly searching for a description of him. So this is what we get told. He has a thick neck and a strong jaw. He is short and squat with enormous hands, a thick chest and a hard ale belly. He is beetle-browed. So for me, perhaps you might think of that differently, but that does not scream Targaryen looks. So it's not just the hair and the eyes. The hair, you're right, it's described as white. Who knows what it could have been beforehand? But none of the rest of that description sounds very Targaryen-y. So the last bit I would round up with is how I approach all of these. Kind of, this character is secretly that character kind of thing. Oh, and finally, you should say, Maester Aemon. You do not have to change your name when you become a Maester. You just lose your surname. Maester Aemon was still called Maester Aemon. So even if you did send Maegor down, he would be Maester Maegor, not Maester Marwyn. So the way I approach all of these kind of things is, there are a few instances already in the story of a character who is secretly another character. For example, I'm pretty sure that Eleras Sorella, that theory holds up very well. I'm perfectly, as many of you will know, I'm very much a fan of Ashara Dane being secretly Howland's wife, Gianna. I also pretty much subscribes to the idea that Quaithe is secretly Shira Seastar. So a lot of these, one character is secretly another. We got, obviously, John Connington got outed as who he was. We get young Griff. George R. R. Martin does do this a reasonable amount, and I kind of think that the more times that's used, the smaller the story becomes. I think we sometimes think to ourselves, oh, this just makes it more complex and more detailed. It does in a way, but for me, the glory of this story and a lot of these great worlds is because they are so vast. And the moment you just say, oh, actually, that character over there isn't an independent person who has got to where they are because of, their own backstory. They're actually this other person here. So we've turned two characters and made them into one character that actually shrinks the universe rather than expands it. So if you go out there, you will find theory upon theory of, and I've got probably a few of these tinfoil ones coming up a bit later. Varys is secretly this, or such and such a character in the Night's Watch is secretly that person, or that member of the Brotherhood Without Banners is secretly this other character from Book 12. All of these things, some of them may well be right. That last one that I was referencing, I actually also quite like. The Richard Lemon Cloak is Richard of Lonmouth. Richard Lonmouth is that's a theory from Lady Gwyn from Radio Westeros, and I remember when I first heard it, I thought, I like that. I really do like that. But the more of these there are, the more they're kind of diminished in their cleverness, because it just means we're always just looking for who is a secret somebody else. And I think George R. R. Martin's a good enough writer not to always have to do that. Magma Frost. This is a very small and unimportant one, but I think the name Brynden, as in Bloodraven, is a Valyrianization of Brandon. We never hear about a Brandon Blackwood. There is a real-world fashion designer by that name. Oh, is there? I didn't know that. I don't think there's a good odds George is referencing him, though. But given the Blackwoods are a First Men house from the north, it's probably a name that exists in their family. There's precedent in the series for altering names to fit different cultures, like Edric Dane, and presumably Jacaerys and Lucerys. So it's plausibly a thing Melissa Blackwood would do. This does raise some strange questions about Brynden Tully, though. So I think you're right that Brandon and Brendan are connected, are sort of slightly different versions of the same thing. I don't think that they're a Valyrianization. Brendan is a Valyrianization of Brandon, partly because it doesn't fit the Valyrian kind of feel for how names go. I mean, you know the AE and the is at the end, the YS at the end of something, that those kind of thing, Aerys, Daenerys, Rhaenyra, Daemon, all of those kind of things, they've got certain structures in there. When you start going into them, you can see how they all sound similar. Brendan doesn't sound like that for me. I think it sounds, as you rightly say, like Brandon. Now, this is how names in our world work, is that you will get a name which has slightly different versions in different parts of the world. So you could just take Ian. An English name of Ian would be Ieuan in Wales. Now, it's still the same thing. Wales is literally just over the border from England, and yet it's just a slightly different way of pronouncing it. There's probably Scottish people are probably already shouting at me that there's a Scottish version, like that Ian with a second I-A-I-N. So I-A-I-N, yep, is often a Scottish type name. There may well be an Irish version of Ian that I'm unaware of, and then you can probably expand out slightly further out from those the islands on which I live as well, to versions of that name. And so I think that's what George R. R. Martin is doing here, is that we get the North has the name Brandon, and then others of that same ethnicity, being First Men and their like, have still got that name, but it's just slightly different, slightly changed. And so we do get Brendan and Brandon. There are other very similar names. So you get Robert Baratheon, but then you get Robert in the north, Glover. So this is something he does quite a few times, is use a slightly different spelling of the same kind of name. Now, what that means, therefore, is that there is a link probably between the Riverlands, which is obviously just south of the north, and out of all of the areas has got probably the greatest preponderance of First Men families who still honour the old gods. And so you get the Tullys and you get the Blackwoods of these as sort of names that they might use in their family. So that for me makes perfect sense. The bit which intrigues me is whether, if we assume that Melissa Blackwood, who was Bloodraven's mother, if we assume that she did the naming, was this in some way deliberate to link across to the family that is most connected with Brandon, the Starks? Because we have now in the Bloodraven's cave, we have Brendan and Brandon. And that could just be a coincidence, but given the fact that there is a massive weirwood tree there, albeit a dead weirwood tree, at Raventree Hall, given what Bloodraven was going to become, you're, I think, right to question whether it really is a complete coincidence. Bear Island saying, hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. I love a lot of wild theories, but the only one I haven't seen talked about is the connection between Balerion, the one-eared cat, and Myrcella. My giant leap is that if Myrcella survives until Arya returns to Westeros, she'll be walked. Alternatively, Cersei will be finished off by tripping over the cat and falling onto the Iron Throne, and one-eared Myrcella is a red herring. That might not do the job if Qyburn has already brought her back from death by infected foot. Okay, so for those who don't get these references, Myrcella obviously is the daughter of Cersei and ostensibly Robert Baratheon, really Jamie. She, in the books, she's gone off down to Dawn, and there is a whole subplot there about Arianne, who all of the Martells are desperately trying to get their revenge on the Lannisters for what happened in Robert's Rebellion, what happened with Oberyn and the Mountain, and they've all, at the start of A Feast for Crows, they've all got these different ideas on how they should go about doing this revenge. And eventually, we get Doran Martell, who just gathers together all of these, the base Oberyn's daughters, Arianne as well, and just imprisons them. Not nicely, but he imprisons to stop them going off and doing their own random things. So that, and I'll do a video at some point on Doran's master plan, but so that he can then direct them to actually, they can actually have a Martell plan, not just like lots of things. But Arianne's plan was, I'll put Myrcella onto the throne. I'll launch a coup and I will put Myrcella on the throne. It's not a particularly well worked through plan. It has to be said. Although the chapters we see here are really fun and well written, you can't really get past the idea that it's like, I'll gather together a few of my friends, a few hangers on, and then ... and then we'll put Myrcella onto the throne. They hadn't really worked out the second half of the plan, but as I say, they're good chapters. It all goes wrong though, and Myrcella loses an ear. Her ear gets cut off. She gets a gash down the side of her face, so she now has one ear. The reference to Balerion is, if you remember back in the early Arya chapters in the Game of Thrones, when she's there with Syria Farrell has sent her rushing around the Red Keep looking for, not trying to catch cats. The one cat that she can't get hold of for a long time is an old tomcat missing an ear, and that is Balerion. And Balerion was the cat, the kitten, that belonged to Rhaenys, who was killed by the Lannisters, the baby daughter of Rhaegar, who was killed by the Lannisters in Robert's Rebellion. So, lots of intercutting things going on there. The theory that I have worked with for quite some time is the fact that Arya, we know that she's a skin changer, and she's learned about skin changing into cats. It's not 100% clear how aware it is of what she's doing or how she's doing it, but she definitely skin changed into cats. She's already got this relationship, as it were, with Balerion. There's a one-eared tomcat that she meets in Braavos that casts our mind back to Balerion in the Red Keep. We know that she wants to go to the Red Keep because all the loads of people that she wants to kill are there. Cersei is there, the Mountain is there. So the kind of working assumption that I've got, others have got, is that she will, if she heads back and goes to King's Landing, she will first of all skin change into Balerion and be working her way through the corridors of King's Landing and the Red Keep like that. So that's the kind of the theory. Bear Island here saying, my giant leap is that Arya skin changes actually not into the one-eared cat, but into the one-eared princess, which is a different take on this. That would require Arya to take another step up in her powers. She starts out just basically walking into Nymeria in her sleep. Then where she's got to now is that seemingly kind of by accident or unintentionally, she walks when she's lost her sight. The faceless men have taken her sight. She walks into a cat and uses the cat's eyes. There's a long jump from that to being able to skin change into a human. Although, as a member of the Faceless Men, she has had the experience of putting on the Faceless Men mask, which is an old person, a dead person's face, and experiencing some of their life experiences by putting on that face. So the hints are all possibly there. And I wouldn't say no to this one. I quite like the thinking, but my money is more on her skin changing into Balerion. The other thing you suggest is Cersei finishing off by tripping over the cat and falling onto the Iron Throne, and Myrcella being a red herring. I mean, I do like the idea, but I think that Cersei will head out. I think she will escape King's Landing, and think she will head and retreat back to Casterly Rock. We're told we're going to see Casterly Rock probably in the next book. If we see that, it's through a POV character. We don't have many POV characters who we could see that through the eyes of. The most likely is Cersei, and the most likely reason why she's there is because she retreats to there because she basically is kicked out of King's Landing. Okay, so I've got one more. I did say I've got quite a few here. I've had to sort of draw them a line in half so that I'll save my voice and I can come back to these. But this is from Stephen saying, "Hello, Robert and Dan, belated Happy New Year, and to you too. I have a theory about the Winterfell crypt, specifically the tombs of Rickard and Brandon, Ned's father and brother. We know that Ned brought back Lyanna's remains to Winterfell, but did he also bring back theirs? I'm not aware of any mention that their remains were kept or exchanged, like the diplomatic exchange of Ned's bones that occurred during the War of the Five Kings, and I doubt the Mad King or his lackeys would consider anything like that. Also, King Aerys killed Rickard with wildfire, which I assume leaves nothing but ash, and I suspect he probably had Brandon's body burned as well. My point is that one way or other, I don't think there was anything left of Ned's father and brother for him to bring home and bury in their tombs. So what is in their tombs? They might just be empty memorials. But if Ned brought back any physical evidence from the Tower of Joy, they would make ideal hiding places." Yes, so I mean, in short answer to the question, did their bones survive? We don't hear. We're not told that the bones were returned. We're not told that the bones all burned up. Ned does think specifically about Lyanna's bones. Other people talk about Lyanna's bones, and so the implication is that they weren't there. And I think you're right. Wildfire probably would destroy the bones as well. So I think there is a fair to middling chance that yes, those tombs are empty, and if that's the case, what does that mean? Well, it might mean nothing, as you say. It might just be that they were just sealed shut, and maybe they kind of left some kind of token of who they were in there or something like that. And that statue's put in front. But they could be hiding something, I think is it does bring to mind this idea that I mentioned it in a video a little bit ago, sort of in passing, this idea that maybe there is some proof evidence about Jon's parentage there, hidden in around Lyanna's tomb, maybe Rhaegar's harp, which nobody really knows where that went. Maybe even And the more I think about this, the more I start to think it will make a reappearance. The crown of Aegon the Conqueror, which disappeared in Dawn. And where was Ned? Where was the Tower of Joy? Dawn. It's entirely possible that they might have taken that crown and decided that that should go to Rhaegar's son. I don't know. The train of logic is a little bit more faltering there, because why would they do that if at the time Rhaegar's other son was still alive, which he was for most of that period, and that was that son was half Dornish. So that part I'm not 100% certain of, but might there be some kind of proof hidden in one of those other tombs? I have to say that unless somebody knows about this, nobody's going to be digging up the tombs of Rickard Stark or Brandon Stark looking for evidence about Jon's parentage. If you were going to leave it somewhere, it would be connected to her statue, her tomb, something along those lines. My instinct is that actually it's probably just her statue. And I again, in that video I did a few weeks ago, I actually think that's lovely. We read that Lyanna made Ned promise several things, and or at least more than one thing. And one of those things, presumably, was hide Jon's identity, don't look after him, etc., etc., which is where Ned pretending that Jon was his bastard son came from. But when you think, what else might a mother make Ned promise, knowing that her son is going to be brought up not knowing either of his parents, not knowing who he is or anything like that, you could imagine that one of the things she might say is, when it's safe, tell him who he is. And another thing is, make sure that he knows what I look like in some way. Give him something that he can see. After he's been told, he can go and have a look at my statue, which makes sense of why those statues are there. Yeah, Ned's cared about his brother and sister, and he loved them deeply, and so he had statues of. Lots of Stark lords would have cared and loved for their siblings who died tragically. They didn't have statues made of them. So this does seem to suggest to me that there must be a particular reason for those statues to be there. And I think at heart, George R. R. Martin's a bit of a softie, and his idea of you will be able to see your mother. Jon wonders what his mother looks like a lot. And for him to be able to, once he's been told, for him to go to the crypts, he has dreams about going into the crypts all the time. Dreams about going there, not being welcome. This is not your place. The statues are saying to him all the time, this is not your place, because he's not a trueborn Stark. But there is something in there that he knows he has to see. And the statue is what he has to see. So that's my kind of take on what's going on there. I do like that thinking. I think one other strand to this, if you want to sort of go down this rabbit hole, my working theory, as I'm sure you'll have seen the videos, is that the statues will come to life. They are bound, the Stark spirits are bound there, and of the lords, and at some point those statues are going to come to life. The statues are always talked about as if they are alive. They're judging, they're looking, they're seeing what's happening. They're always described as if they're alive. And so they're going to come to life. And what we're told is that each of them has got a sword across their lap. But we're told that Rickard and Brandon's are taken by the gang, Bran's gang, when they were hiding down there. Hodor goes off and finds some really old random one. We don't know where that was from. But the two most recent ones were both taken. What does that mean? well, it means that those statues won't have swords, but perhaps that doesn't matter if their spirits aren't there. Perhaps they won't be raised if the spirits aren't there, so the swords don't matter. Okay, so that is it. That's my tinfoil theories I've had from my patrons. I hope you enjoyed me going through them. Tried to go through not just give flat yes no answers to these things, but try and go off on a few different tangents, give you a few different things to think about. So I will do another one of these in a few weeks' time. If you are watching this live, as in the premiere, if you're in the chat, do go and thank the moderators, who I'm sure are there and are doing an excellent job. Otherwise, I would love to thank the moderators. You do a fantastic job. And patrons, thank you so much. I will be back next week with, I think I will do an actual normal live stream next week. But we've got lots of things planned for this channel going forward, a lot of exciting ideas, so keep an eye out for that. But if you are watching this back, well, I was going to say a bit later, pretty much any time you will find appearing somewhere around here are a few more live streams like this appearing somewhere around here, is a link to my Patreon page. If you would like to support this channel, that is the best way to do that. Do let me know your tinfoil theories down there if you'd like me to. I'll have a read through before I do my next one of these, and I'll pick a couple of them out from there, as well as what I get sent from my patrons, and we'll work our way through them. But take care, everyone, and I will see you again next time.